Okay, like I said, we'll kind of zip through this. It's kind of stuff that most of you have heard before. So the first thing, just a quick agenda thing here. What we're going to do is I'm just going to give you a quick overview on kind of what's going on with the chipping week and the bin and that kind of stuff, and then Neil's going to chime in about keeping the hours, and we got some prizes again, and then Nancy's going to do a talk on our native plants and the importance of keeping the native plants healthy and reducing the amount of invasives on the island here. And then at the end, I'll get into a bit more detail on the two parks and what our strategy is there. So having said that, let's get started here. So the first thing I just wanted to do was thank, because the fall program is not, we call part of it the Firesmart program, but it's really a group of different individuals and organizations. So there's a lot of cooperation and collaboration there. We've got Diggs and Pina have been doing this kind of stuff for quite a long time. Newer people into the group are the Gary Oak group, and they've been putting a lot of effort and labor into the last couple of years as well. And also for this year in particular, and then providing the chipper and stuff, city parks and city fire services, they've put a lot of time into Protection Island over the last couple of years, and hopefully we're seeing the benefits of that. And then also just everybody that comes out and helps out and stuff. And thanks to Emily for running the meetings, and to Tom for letting us use his Zoom every time we want to do something here. So basically, I think everybody's heard the story before, but I'll just quickly go through how we got to this point. We had our experts meeting earlier in the year with all of our island botanists and biologists and foresters and et cetera, and biologists. And so that was very productive. And out of that group, you see Nancy has been coming to everything religiously, and we certainly appreciate that, and providing comments on our plans and stuff like that. And then after that meeting, we met with all the different groups who work in the parks in some capacity over the year to kind of coordinate and maximize our volunteer time on the island and pick a park we wanted to work in for various objectives. We said after that, in those two meetings, we had city parks attended those meetings, and then we had a meeting with Brad Wood, our fire services contact, and talk about budgets and set some priorities, and that kind of went through that. And that's still kind of a bit of an ongoing process, just depending on how things have kind of shaken out. At the time of the budget meeting, we weren't sure about whether we were going to be able to burn or not. If we weren't allowed to burn, that was going to cost us more money because we wanted to get an extra bin, et cetera. So that's been kind of a moving target through the year. And then in the last month or so, we've had a couple visits focusing on neighbors into the two parks we want to work in, Hidden Treasure and Elizabeth Park. And those meetings have went really well. In both cases, there's lots of good discussion, and based on those meetings, we've revised our prescriptions a little bit for each park. And that brings us to this meeting, which is kind of our de facto public meeting, just explaining what we're doing, and hopefully if anybody's got any questions, we can answer those. It's unfortunate we couldn't meet in person, but it's just the way of life these days. So where we're at right now is our community project is Elizabeth Park. That is going to go on November 1st, and it's going to start at 1 o'clock, and everybody's welcome to come or encouraged to come, or please come, because there's so much work to do there. It's crazy, and bring gloves for sure. Daphne is wild in there, so we want to get as much of it out as we can. And so that's a community project. Hidden Treasure is kind of more of a restoration project, and the neighbors have been fantastic. We had a really good turnout last week to help pull invasive plants and do some limbing and pruning and et cetera. And it's starting to look really good there. We generated a massive pile of weeds there last week. And then the chipping week is November 2nd to 6th. So I think the way it's setting up is that the arborists are going to come over a couple days ahead of time, do the trees in the parks that need to be taken down, and then the chipper will arrive around the 2nd of November. So see, everybody's getting their branches out, which is great. They're going to keep those guys busy. And then just a quick thing is that we've also scheduled, like I was mentioning, for Hidden Treasure Park, every Thursday at 10 o'clock. The neighbors are going and doing some work for an hour there, and anybody is welcome. So come on down if you've got an hour to kill. And also we're doing the same thing in Elizabeth Park on Tuesdays at 10 o'clock. So yeah, we got enough to keep you busy there, I'm sure. So that's kind of the overview of where we're at here. So I'm just going to turn it over to Neil. And oh no, I guess I got a couple more things. Yeah, can you throw up that first slide there, Emily, please? I've probably already said some of this stuff, so. Okay, you're gonna have to, yeah, there you go. Okay, so can you go to the next one? Yeah. Here we go. Okay, so yeah, so here's the highlights of the chipping week, sorry. So we're gonna have one bin at the dog park, and we're gonna focus on filling that with invasive plants and anything that's too small to chip. So most people, because we are allowed to burn this year, so I think a lot of people will have little fires going. So we don't anticipate a whole bunch of small stuff, but if people don't want to burn or whatever, they can bring it down. And in the spring, we had a bin specifically for lumber and building materials, but we won't have that this fall. We'll try and set that up for our residents' Firesmart thing in the spring. We do have a bit of a problem this fall. We don't quite have as much manpower to move material to the dog park as we did in the spring. So if you can help each other move stuff, that'd be great. And Caden did say he's available to, if anybody needs to hire him or whatever. And Jim and Brenda will use our Lions trailer, and they'll do a couple of laps around the island here and there, and will potentially might help us out for a half a day as well. So hopefully we can just see what we got and get that stuff down there. All of the chips this year, with the exception of the chips, well, we're going to basically any chips for residential use are going to be dumped at the dog park. The tree that came down over the fence by the tennis court also came down over the power line, and the line is really low, so they can't get the truck in there to dump chips there this year. So we're going to have to dump them all at the dog park. Next one there, Emily, please. So yeah, so we are allowed to burn, and Brad Wood said that he would give us a permit to have a slightly larger fire at the dog park, so we can stuff that we can burn at the park as well. If we're getting full with the bin, we can light some stuff up there as well. And I was talking to Jim Harris. He wants to have a giant bonfire and start roasting a few things, but I said probably not going to happen. But yeah, so it actually would be a good demonstration to keep a little bit of holly aside and throw it on the fire and give everybody a really good impression of what holly looks like when it burns. Like, it's just instant, and it's really quite something. So okay, and I already mentioned the park cleanup day, Elizabeth Park. Jim Harris is meet out in front of Jim's house at 1, and bring gloves and keep track of your hours. Okay, next one, please. Okay, and then, so we're gonna have 3 piles. Basically the pile that we generate every year, Veronica's just put up the notices from the city as far as, the pile size and all that. And she'll be monitoring that diligently as she does every year. So please don't put your invasives in that pile. Start a second pile, and you can go a little bit larger because they're going into the bin. But the thing with hawthorn and holly is that those branches are just a real pain. Whatever it looks like, it just doesn't crunch down in the bin. So if you can limb the branches and lay it all in there, or so we can get it down there in kind of a more compact shape, that would be great. Or, it'd be awesome to burn it like that. It looks pretty spectacular. And then there's one more pile that is the smaller native species pile. So if you don't want to burn, bring it down and we'll jam it into the bin. We were pretty impressed at how much stuff we slapped into those bins this spring. So I think we can handle a lot in there. So yeah, so we'll save the rest for later, but Neil's gonna just talk about hours and that kind of stuff. So turn it over to you, Neil. Here, there you go. I think you're muted, Neil. Still muted. Can you unmute him, Neil? Emily? Or?
No, I'm asking him to unmute. That's my only option right now.
He seems to be not being able to do that.
No.
No, that says mute.
Oh, there you go. Okay, there you go. Okay, you're good. Yep, okay. Talk away.
Right. Well, yeah, this is going to be fairly short, unlike most of my reports, which go on and on for a long time. As most people are aware, I hope, that the hours of community service that we get through Firesmarting helps to generate funds for us to bring bins and chipping equipment over. So last spring, we asked residents to keep track of their hours and pass them on to me during our spring cleanup, and that worked quite well. We've got a lot of hours, so I'm asking the residents to keep track of their hours from October the 1st to the 6th of November. And I will record your hours, and then I will put your name in for a draw for a WASP Firesmart sprinkler kit. Last spring we had a draw for 2, and yeah, so the WASP kits have been well received by residents on the island. So it won't be based on the highest number of hours or how many times you submit your hours. Once I get your name, whether it's for 2 hours or 20 hours, your name will go in the bucket, and we'll have a draw for that. We're looking at probably the week after our Firesmart week. Firesmart week is the 6th to the 2nd to the 6th. So it may be, it might be around maybe November the 11th. We'll probably want to have another Zoom meeting with a kind of a roundup on how this Firesmart went in the fall. Yeah, so any questions?
Are your kids available to pull names again, Emily?
Yeah, I'm sure they would be keen to do that. We'll run the meeting a little earlier.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Neil.
I've got Emily's kids on the list for doing the heavy duty. They're heavy duty working, lifting the names out of the bucket.
Sweet. Okay, thanks, Neil. Okay, so one of the things, like I said, we're combining our Firesmart stuff. Some of the invasive plants we have on the island are fairly bad from a fire perspective. Others aren't so bad, but they're bad from other perspectives. So Nancy's been working with us all year, and so we thought that it would be good for Nancy just to do a quick talk and just impress on us the importance of promoting our native plants and trying to help and get rid of some of the invasives. So I'll turn it over to Nancy.
Okay, thanks very much. I thought I wouldn't do the PowerPoint, but I did prepare one, and so I think just while I'm talking, I will just go through very quickly in about, oh, host has disabled screen sharing. Maybe I can't do that. Can you all hear me anyway?
Yeah, I'm trying to fix it right now so you can
Oh, thanks,
share.
Emily. Okay.
Hopefully that'll work. Try it. Does it work now?
No,
No.
never mind.
Okay, sorry.
I sent a small version of my talk to Rick, so you're welcome to share that, Rick. And really, it's just some pretty pictures of the really beautiful native plants that we have on the island. We're really fortunate to have so much the parks and the natural areas, and they're important for so many reasons. It's not just the plants themselves, but of course their habitat to all the beautiful birds and insects, frogs and snakes that we have on the island as well. So they're really important. And in all of Canada, the particular vegetation that we have here that's part of the coastal Douglas fir zone is only found in this one small region in all of Canada. And so a lot of the species that we have on the island are pretty rare. If you look at their distributions across Canada, you only find them here, Gary oak being one of them, but a lot of the other shrubs and flowering plants that we have as well are restricted to this area. So, and there's less than 5% of the original Gary oak ecosystems still remaining, more or less intact. And so what the work that we do to look after these natural areas that we have on Protection Island is really important for all of us and for all the other species. So I'll just go over a couple of the species that we have in the parks that we've been working on this year. There's some really nice Pacific yews in a couple of the parks. Flowering dogwood, which has become quite rare because of a blight that's impacted a lot of our flowering dogwoods, but it is our provincial flower. And we're lucky to have some really nice ones on the island. And in the parks, we have Pacific crabapple, which is our only native apple species. And we have a native cherry as well, bitter cherry. The cherries aren't great eating, they're a bit bitter, but it's still a really good tree for wildlife. And it's also important for First Nations because the bark is used for basketry decoration and other purposes. We have cascara, which is a well-known medicine tree whose bark is used. And we have some nice cascaras in different parks. And the understory, we have Saskatoon berry, we have salal or ocean spray, mock orange. I was really pleased to see mock orange, two native species of roses, Nootka rose and dwarf wild rose. And I want to make a special mention of the honeysuckles that we have, because some people seem to think that the orange honeysuckle should be removed from our forests. And I've seen some really big old growth orange honeysuckle cut at the base, and of course that will kill it. It's a native species, and although it does wind around some trees, maybe too tightly, unless the tree is really threatened by it, we should just leave them, because the flowers are really important for hummingbirds especially. And then we have the little purple flowered honeysuckle, which is more of, it scrambles over the bushes, and also important for hummingbirds and other species. And it's really restricted in North America, just to our little corner of the world here. We have trailing blackberry, our native blackberry, not to be confused with the big and overbearing Himalayan blackberry, which has wonderful berries, but it can be really invasive and take over these native shrubs quite readily. In the wetlands, we have hardhack, Spirea, which has beautiful flowers. We have red huckleberry and a very few evergreen huckleberries. And then herbaceous plants. We have some really nice ones, vanilla leaf with the three-parted leaf that forms a ground cover. We have several plants in the lily family, the camas species, crown brodia, and chocolate lily, and tiger lily, which isn't that common, but we do have it here. We have a little mustard called toothwort, which is a nice feature of some of our parks, and a creeping mint called yerba buena, which makes a nice tea, and an orchid called rattlesnake plantain orchid with the really nice patterned white and green leaves, false Solomon seal, and a couple of really interesting plants that are saprophytic, so they have no green leaves. One is the Indian pipe, which has white flowers, and we also have coral root orchid. We have sea blush, one of the flowers, and trillium, another one of the lilies. So those are just a few, and Rick has a copy of that PowerPoint that illustrates all of those. And so when we're removing the invasive species, we're really creating room for these species to flourish, and they'll be a benefit to all of us and all of the other species we share this island with. So thank you very much. Thank you, Rick, for all the work you're doing, and all of the committee. We really appreciate it.
Nancy, maybe while we still got you here, can you just talk about, like, when we're doing the work in the parks, we're trying to focus on, say, we're ivy, daphne, blackberry, and holly. But because there's so much in some parks, you had mentioned it the other day about just people, and hopefully we'll get a lot of people. So just how we should be careful when we're cleaning the parks and stuff.
Yeah, because you don't want to impact the native species that are growing there too. So just when you're walking around, try to keep to the trails as much as possible, and then look under your feet for things like, well, there's a little patch of licorice fern in Elizabeth Park, or there's little patches of rattlesnake plantain orchid, and some of the shrubs as well. So yeah, just keep try not to trample too much. This is actually the best time of year to be doing this work, because earlier in the year a lot of these plants are blooming or fruiting, and you want to protect them from, in that stage especially. They're mostly quite resilient by this time of the year.
Great. Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's been awesome having you along with us, Nancy. I think we find new plants every time we go out there. So it's
I always love finding new plants.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. Rattlesnake plantain in Hidden Treasure Park. There's actually quite a bit of it, and has that look of an invasive plant. Like it looks like something that somebody would have dropped out of their garden or whatever. And so yeah, the person does have to be careful for sure. So okay, can we throw that PowerPoint back up there, Emily? So we're going to talk about the parks that we're doing on this fall. Okay, so here's my exhaustively developed site map here. So the two parks, Hidden Treasure Park we're just doing the western part of the park, basically from Trillium Trail over to behind Compton's, Carol and Larry's place as well, and behind Barb's place there as well. So that park has been heavily affected the last few years because it had a high component of Grand Fir, and the Grand Fir has all died over the last few years pretty much. So it's a pretty open, and you can see the invasives really starting to pick up there. So we'll get to the objectives of the park there in a second. But so that's the one in the north end is about an acre that we're doing there. And then Elizabeth Park in the south end is, with the exception of Gallows, it's kind of the furthest south park on the island. It's about an acre, 1.2 acres in that range. And it's accessed in two directions, one across from Jim Harris's house and the other side beside Lamoureux's, between Lamoureux's and Brent's, there's an access point there as well. So we'll get to that park in a minute. So the next slide shows our site visit with the neighbors. As you can see, it was a pretty good turnout, and we're looking at what we wanted to do there. Basically, it's a invasive removal is the main priority there. So the next slide shows our first workday last week. I think we developed 2 or 3 of those piles. So yeah, and that's just one corner of what we have to do there. So I think by the time the end of the month rolls around, we're gonna make a really good dent in that park there. So the prescription for this park is basically we need to get rid of a lot of those invasive plants. I'm not going to say all of them because that's pretty much impossible, and initiate some restoration work. So the one thing we do have, which is great, is we have these 2 weed wrenches, and one is a smaller one and one's a larger one, and we can pull out all the Daphne by the roots, all of the except for the big hollies, we can pull them all out by the roots. So that should really impact them going forward. And if we kind of go in year to year and people just continually pick out the small ones, that's going to really help. And then the other scope of this, and then the restoration work basically is planting of trees and shrubs in there. And then Trillium Trail on the one side is where the trail is supposed to go, but where it comes out by Doug Ruff's is actually on a private lot. So what we'd like to do is reestablish that trail using one of the loads of chips, and it's not a well-established trail in there anymore, and get people aware of where the trail actually is, and going forward, maybe we can start connecting these trails back up the way they used to be. So like I say, the area is about an acre, and it basically goes from Trillium Trail to the west there. So the next slide shows what we want to do then. So there's very minimal amount of limbing to do to create that 2-meter distance from the ground or the shrubs. So that was done relatively quickly, and we've been starting to pull branches out to the roadside, and we're working on the invasive plants. We are focusing on the 4 main ones: holly, ivy, Daphne, and there is some blackberry in one corner there, so we're pulling that all out as well. So we're bringing that to the roadside tomorrow. The restoration work, I think, is the most interesting part of this project. We've purchased Actually, it turned out to be 26 plants, trees and shrubs. Some of the ones that were on Nancy's list there, we've got flowering dogwood, Pacific crabapple, red alder. We've got some really nice looking western yew, and some Saskatoon, and some rose, and a few other things. So we're gonna hopefully after tomorrow, the following week, we can start planting. And Peter was going to pick up some fencing material today and start building some cages so we can cage them and keep the deer away from them. The city is also donating quite a few red alders and a bunch of salal as well. So we'll plant that in there as well. We're going to do a little bit of a trial with the red alder, going to cage some of it and some we've uncaged. I'm thinking that I've never really noticed deer really going after red alder that much. So if we don't need to cage it and they're not going to bother it, that certainly saves us time, money, and we can probably free plant some red alder in some areas as well. So, and then, like I say, we're going to reestablish the trail. Peter's going to rough it out here over the next couple weeks where it's supposed to go, and then once we get some chips, we're going to reestablish that. So it should be a pretty interesting project, and I think it's going to really turn that park around and make it look pretty good. What's happened with all these trees being removed and all the work that's being done in there, there's really no buffering for either establishing a trail or people looking from backyard to backyard. So it'd be nice to get some of the shrubbery back in there and give people a little bit of privacy. And our strategy is to plant the shrubs that grow maybe 15 to 20 feet tall, plant them around the closer to the neighbors, and then plant the taller trees closer to the middle, so we don't have issues going forward with trees falling on people's houses. So that's Hidden Treasure. Our second park is Elizabeth Park. So this is kind of what Elizabeth Park looks like. There's quite a bit of Daphne, and now there's getting to be, there's been quite a few people over the summer picking away there and pulling Daphne and putting it under tarps and that kind of stuff. So it is starting to open up a little bit, but it's a very daunting task there, I gotta say. There's a lot of Daphne, and there's a lot of Daphne that's 4 or 5 feet tall as well. So it is a good time to pull it, though. Like Nancy said, the ground is still pretty dry, and on that end of the island, I think it's looser soil. So the work is going along not bad, but there's a lot to do, that's for sure. And then so there's the Daphne issue. The next slide shows all of the low branches and stuff. Because the canopy is so tight in at least a portion of the park, all of the lower branches have died off over the years. So you've got this real tangle of dead branches. So when we had our visit with the neighbors there, the prescription called for just trimming to 2 meters, but everybody encouraged us to go higher where the branches are dead. So we've done that. So a lot of the park has actually been pruned now, and it's starting to look quite a bit better. So there's a sort of 2 treatment units in this park. There's the Douglas fir that's got the Daphne underneath it, and then the other side is the ocean spray, where there's a lot of hawthorn in there, and there's a few Douglas fir and a few Gary oaks kind of scattered through there as well. It's super thick. There's tons of ivy, tons of Daphne, and the next slide shows the trail, and it's just a real mess, really. So what we want to do in there, the next slide will show what our objectives are. So our Firesmart work is basically the limbing of the trees, the removal of the combustible material, and the pruning of the ocean spray. The deader stuff is very combustible, and we want to keep the ocean spray vigorous as well. So pruning off the old branches and stuff really helps it out long term. And we want to reestablish the trail as well. And at our site meeting the other day, the neighbors and everyone else who came along really thought it was important to get these trails reestablished, and encouraged us not only to reestablish a trail, but to put trailhead signs up and start encouraging people to use those trails. So Elizabeth Park, like I say, it's 1.2 acres. It seems like it's about 100 the way it's, there's so much stuff to do in there. And then the 2 treatment units. So there's the access from Lamoureux's, which kind of accesses the ocean spray area, and then the access across from Jim Harris's accesses more into the Douglas fir zone. So the next slide shows our first treatment unit. So basically what we want to do is, we can just skip this one, Emily. I think we've kind of covered that. So in the first unit with all the Douglas fir, we wanted to limb up the trees to stop that ladder fuel from getting up into the canopy there. Pull all the branches out. There was a kid's fort in there, and starting to be some structures and some trees. So those have been removed as well, and they'll be brought to the roadside as well. The invasive plant removal in there is really focused on Daphne. There's a little bit of holly, but it's not a huge amount. But and there is a little bit of hawthorn as well. And with the hawthorn, we're going to try and not cut the bigger stuff. We might try a little experiment and cut some of the bigger stuff and try and wrap the stump into like a plastic bag, something dark, so that see if it'll stop it from suckering. But that'll just be an experiment for a couple trees. And then the smaller trees, we'll try and pull them out with the weed wrenches. Next slide, please. And then basically we want to do some restoration work as well, because this Daphne, even though we're getting good success in pulling the roots out, it's not going to be deterred. It'll come back, and we're not really sure if it's allelopathic, just that it's got toxins that'll affect anything else growing around it. But I did notice in a lot of areas in there that the Oregon grape is growing right beside the Daphne. So we're going to get a whole bunch of Oregon grape and plant that in the spring, and some salal as well. I think Oregon grape is the key there. And then once we get that established and winning the battle against the Daphne, then maybe we can introduce some other species in there as well over the next few years. And then basically get that trail. The trail is fairly well established from the road in through this section, but once we pull everything out, we're probably gonna wipe it out a little bit. So we'll need to reestablish where it goes and that kind of stuff. So we're not sure. I don't know if we need to use chipping material in this trail, so we'll just kind of play that by ear. But I kind of think it's quite a well-established trail, anyways. So then the other unit is the ocean spray area, and so we want to prune back those ocean spray, and particularly maybe a more aggressive pruning around fences, and there's a few sheds and stuff that are pretty close. We want to try and create that 2-meter distance there from the fences to the ocean spray as well. So that's a big job in there. There's a lot of cutting to do there. So, and then we'll pull all that stuff out. Probably most of that stuff will go between Brent's and Lamoureux's there and get chipped up over there. And then the other task in there is the invasive plants, and man, there's a lot of them. So it's the ivy is quite prominent in there, and there is a lot of the hawthorn in there as well. So we'll see what we can do. And of course, there's tons of Daphne. So then the next slide shows us the restoration work in there. So we're going to try and see how we do there. If we can get enough of a dent in that park, then maybe we can start doing some underplanting in there as well. I think salal and potentially even the odd sword fern might do okay in there. But that'll be in the spring. But, we really need to make a dent in there before we start planting underneath it there. And then there is a chance, some of those ocean sprays and stuff, and if we take a couple of hawthorns out, we could create a couple of gaps in there. So Pacific dogwood, bitter cherry would be really good choices to try and plant in there. So the Pacific dogwoods we got from Streamside Nursery were beautiful trees, and they're already about 6 feet tall. So they would get a good start in there. So, and then we want to reestablish the trail as well. So that's our optimistic project for this year, and hopefully, like I say, we get lots of people out and we can make a good dent in it. I think with these Tuesday work parties, I think we can pretty much win the battle in the Unit A with the Douglas fir, and then when everybody comes for the community work party, we can really concentrate on this Unit B and do a lot of pulling and cutting and work there. So yeah, that's where we're at. So hopefully everybody comes out November 1st at 1 o'clock and brings your gloves, bring some water, because you're going to sweat. So that's next phase is our question period here. So if anybody's got a question, do you want to just I don't think there's very many people, Emily, so you could probably just unmute everybody if you want. Well, there's a few more people. Oh, Kate's come. Hi, Kate.
Hey.
Brenda's here. Okay, so if anybody has a question, please fire away here.
Rick, it's Frank here. I'd like to ask a question, if you can hear me.
Absolutely, yep.
Great. So with the Firesmart concept here, just a lot of these invasive things that plants, vegetation we're trying to remove from the parks. So do you think, is some of this because people are sort of taking it out of their yards and throwing it into the park?
Well, I think in some cases that's definitely the case. Like you'll see, it's interesting in Elizabeth Park, there's quite a few neighbors around Elizabeth Park that actually are planting Daphne in their yards, and here we are pulling it out in the park, right? So, I think Daphne is kind of one of those things that it was, it was an ornamental bush that kind of has gone a little crazy in this environment, and there's really not anything that's to stop it. So you got Daphne, and then there's the holly and the hawthorn, which both have prolific berries in the fall, and so there's a bit of a discussion on what happens to those berries. People think that the birds, it's an important food source for the birds, and other people are saying, well, the birds are eating them because there's not a lot of other food to eat, but they don't really digest them properly. And in either case, what's happening is they're spreading them around the island like crazy as well. And then all those species, when you go to pull them out, like they're all interconnected under the ground, right? They're just basically they're one massive plant that just keeps sprouting up, and I would imagine they didn't get here by accident. And I'm sure that you're right that people brought them here for everybody loves holly. It looks great. It's great at Christmas time, etc. So they look nice, but they've gotten out of control. So
yeah, I totally get that. I thought it looked like a substitute to a rhododendron without the flower. And then I realized, my God, it just goes everywhere over the property. And so now I'm removing them as well. I'm trying to get the salal coming back on my own lot. Rick, just one more thing I wanted to add on the Firesmart idea. the project. Can you just give me some feedback on these parks? We're trying to, clean them up and do these things. What is is there an argument to be made from Firesmart as far as access to the park, getting access to the parks and cleaning that up for fire access and public access? Is there any discussion on that?
We did, when we first started, when we were developing our plan last year, we met with all the various groups and stuff. And one of the meetings we had was with fire services and Jason, our fire chief here and stuff. And basically, Jason said it's a nice thing to have, but if there's a fire in the park and it's behind somebody's house, they're going to go through somebody's yard to get to the fire. They're going to take the shortest route, and it doesn't always the trailhead doesn't always coincide, say, with the fire hydrant or stuff like that. So they encouraged us to have good access, but it's not the critical thing for them when they're fighting a fire. But I think in general, I think everybody, well, obviously not everybody, but most people agree that we want to reestablish our accesses around to all these parks, and there's probably a broader discussion that needs to take place about the inland parks. They're not really under anybody's purview right now, and they really need a champion. And I think developing access, getting people starting to use parts of them are going to drive the demand for all the parks. And there's two or three that there's some questions about where the access is, whether it's being blocked, maybe it could be an accidental blockage because somebody didn't realize that the trailhead is actually there or whatever. I mean, there's just a million reasons. But so we thought strategically, as we're kind of doing a more holistic approach to cleaning these parks and trying to cover all the bases, trails development or reestablishment would be a component to that. And for this year and probably for next year, we're kind of sort of cherry picking the easy ones, the ones we know where the access is and stuff. And then I think there's going to have to be a point where we say, look, there's however 3 accesses, 6 accesses, whatever, that we either have to have resurveyed or meet with the neighbors. And in some cases, like I say, they don't even know there is an access there. And because there is a lot of building, and we've seen the trail just past our place with the construction. The trail was always in the wrong place. It was on private land. And so the guy's now built his house and built his fence, and there's no trail there anymore. And the trail is actually 2 lots over. So, that's the kind of stuff we need to reestablish those things.
Yeah.
Kind of pick away at it.
I have to say, I disagree with Jason's position on that. I think, some properties, more and more properties are becoming fenced entirely. And so I don't see that as being a viable option to taking a fire out in a park. And I think, I really think that it would be smart for Firesmart to, make that part of our objective here is to clear those access points. They are public access points. They are dedicated. There's no question about that. And it just, to me, makes a lot of sense. As I said to you the population of the island today, the hazard, the risk, everything, I'm sure we're at peak, its highest that it's ever been. And we got to get smarter about this. And so we got to go back. We've got these access points to the parks. The parks have been neglected. Yes, I think with the population we're having today, we've got to start using the parks. That's what they were intended for. I had a conversation. I'll just share this. If I just take another couple minutes or a minute here, I'll just share with you. I had a conversation with one of my father's partners, who's in his mid-90s now, about the concept when they developed the island, 1959, 1960, about what the park intent was. And the parks were 100% intended to be used by the public or by the residents. They weren't meant to be exclusive green space reserves, do not go type areas. They were meant for everybody to enjoy and use. And in those days, the development was done with the provincial government. There was no regional district. There was no, and it wasn't with the city. So all those parks were dedicated to the province. And then I gather when the regional districts were formed, they were handed over to the regional district. And then when we became amalgamated into the city, the city inherited those dedicated park areas. So they're to be used as parks. So that's why I just think it's incumbent upon us to get smart about this and protect them and use them and enjoy them rather than the roads as we're all walking these days predominantly. We should be enjoying the parks. And and I just think the Firesmart thing is a great way to get this, to make it safe and smart and enjoyable for everyone.
Yep, I don't think I disagree with that at all. That's yeah, and we because we're in our infancy here, like Neil was saying, we the volunteer hours that we've submitted so far to Brad, he's been quite overwhelmed, and so he's applying for a significant amount more money for next year. And then we also he wants us to do a little bit of an update to our plan as well. So, you know, those are the kind of comments that I think we need to pass on to him. So yeah, no, I think it's prudent that it's the first time since I've been here that we've been doing parks work where we actually have some money attached to doing the work. So, you know, if we can achieve more, then I think that's great. And you know, I got to say that the interest and the buy-in from especially the neighbors and what we've done so far has been really good. So I think that's I thought we would have a lot more opposition to like you're saying, like nobody want anybody in their what they consider their backyards, but it's been exactly the opposite. I don't think I've heard one person say that at all. Everybody is quite they want those trails reestablished. So that's really encouraging.
Well, that's good. I like Nancy, I really thank you for what you're doing and the energy you're putting into this, but this makes the most sense to get those access points opened and get rid of the risk, the fuel, the dead fuel in the parks, and clean them up and make them reduce the risk and the hazard and enjoyable for everybody. And I think your program is the way to penetrate that and make it smart.
Yeah, and you know, it's like I say, it's the parks part of it, like the fall Firesmart thing is really a collaboration of a lot of groups. So, you know, we're fortunate that we're getting some money, but you know, but Parks has been quite generous with us in the past with the chipping program and providing that for, you know, chipper for a week is not cheap. So, so yeah, I think as a whole, we've been getting a lot smarter as far as pooling our resources and getting more done each year too. So I think it's going pretty well. So
I headed down to Elizabeth Park yesterday. Was it yesterday morning? I think it was. Yeah, yesterday morning.
Oh, in the rain, yeah.
And in the rain, after the storm and the rain and everything, I didn't realize it had been canceled. And I headed down there and I met some other neighbors there. And I said, I've come down to pick weeds. And they said, yeah, well, that's great, you know, but you won't last more than 20 minutes because you'll pull your back out pulling those damn daphnes out of the ground.
Yeah, well, that's the advantage of being a few pounds overweight for myself. I seem to have the right leverage and pulling them out not bad so far. So does anybody else have any questions there?
My concern, it's Kate.
Oh, Kate, hi Kate.
sorry, you're going to hate me, but I just want to mention that that is habitat for wildlife in those unmanicured parks. They're supposed to, I understand they're supposed to be. Just I want to mention that because I know in a park that it's behind me, but I don't border, I'm not on it. There's deer and stuff back there. And I'm concerned, that's just a concern because I've seen in the 38 years I've been here, a lot of trees come down, a lot of vegetation and wildlife habitat taken away. And so it's just a concern. I just want to mention that because the animals aren't going to speak up and they're part of our life here. And if you don't like it, well, anyway, they're hopefully going to be here to stay, but we've got to remember things like that. Also on Trillium Way, there's a lot of lamium in getting into the lot more than I've ever seen along the trail. Yeah. With the intertwined with the trilliums, it's getting worse and worse. Also chips. I love the chips on the path, but is that not a fire hazard? Chips on the path?
So we've had let's talk about the chips first. We had quite a good discussion with the two fire chiefs and tons of other people, and nobody, even like none of the fire people thought that they were, they might be maybe a minor fire hazard, but to be safe, what we thought the best idea would be was if we're going to put chips on trails, to do it in the fall, so they're more to establish the path. And then in a lot of cases, they actually, by establishing the path, it keeps people from kind of going around the mud holes and making the path wider and wider as the winter goes along. So that's kind of the idea. And I think it's not something we want to do everywhere. It's just like in Hidden Treasure Park, the idea of using the chips there is because the trail is really not there anymore. And we want to get people thinking about the right direction to go and that kind of stuff. But getting back to the trees, I think that's the core of the work in Hidden Treasure is exactly what you're saying, Kate. Is we've lost a lot of trees in there, and we've tried to kind of slow the impact from wildlife by leaving a lot of 10 to 20. And I think there's a couple that are a bit taller than that, stubs, so that woodpeckers and other creatures can still use them for the next 10 or 15 years. But all the trees and shrubs we selected were specific for wildlife, Saskatoons and crab apples and that kind of stuff, so that they're not only kind of restoring the site, but they're kind of going to be useful for the wildlife there as well.
I'm not against, and by the way, I'm not against the chips. I love it. But I have seen when I was up at the university, somebody put a cigarette butt and not out, and they put it in the chips that were there they changed that eventually because I had to go put the fire out and go get somebody. So that's my concern, cigarette butts, of course, through the trails. And if it's opened up for more access and there's more people and summer people and tourists going through there and, not with respecting the homes as much, or, our homes as much as we do, there'll be, I just know it's going to be a problem. That's okay. And when we're supposed to keep track of our hours, is it up to November 6th or that Neil said? What was it about keeping track of our hours? I'm sorry, I missed the first part he said.
Go ahead, Neil.
From now on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'll take your hours actually in terms of the draw for the WASP sprinklers. That would be from the 1st of November to the 6th of, the 1st of October to the 6th of November.
Oh, 1st of October. Okay, that's what you said. I couldn't hear.
But,
okay.
I mean, otherwise, anytime during the year, if you've been out doing some Firesmart on your property or in the parks or whatever, and send me an email with your hours. I will record it, and it all eventually ends up helping helping the committee with getting the funding.
Good. Yeah, good. No, I just couldn't catch the first date you mentioned.
Yeah.
My question, sorry guys, but I just questions. You said the 3 different piles, so I don't understand what the number 3 smaller native species pile. I thought, why are we pulling native species?
Well, what we'll have is we'll have some stuff like smaller branches that are too small to chip and that kind of stuff. So we you always end up with sort of a pile
Okay,
of
got it.
stuff
Okay,
that's too small to chip. So yeah,
Oh,
that's,
okay. I just didn't understand why it said native. And okay,
yeah.
I-
Technically, we could combine that with the invasive pile, but we're going to try and keep them separate. I just wanted to ask Nancy if she wanted to say anything about the plants, the trees and shrubs we're planting and correlating that to wildlife.
Oh, to sit. Yes, I'm unmuted. Yeah, thanks, Rick. The species that were ordered, almost all of them have value for wildlife of one sort or another.
Good.
Either flowering plants that are good for pollinating insects and songbirds, and a lot of them have edible fruit of one sort or another as well. And yeah, so I'm really happy with the selection that that we put together and that you've managed to get for the parks, because I think every one of them, well, obviously being native species, they all have a role to play in this particular ecosystem that we have here.
Yeah, and I think also they're going to look nice too, right? Like the roses will look great, and I mean those yews are going to be fantastic. They look so nice already. So.
and the deer will love eating them.
Yeah, they will. Yeah, I mean we're gonna put these cages up for a period of time until they get established, and then they're native species, and they should be able to thrive once they get up to a certain height. So these cages aren't there forever. So.
Yeah, good. Thank you. No, I just, it's always a concern of mine. I have a lot of animals living in my yard now.
Those are great questions, Kate.
Sorry,
Yeah,
well, it's
sure.
just they lived in all the woods that were surrounding me before, and so they've all figured out, hey, let's go live at Kate's place, and I'm happy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, I think we'll try and wrap it up here. But yeah, we just, like I say, Tuesdays at 10 o'clock is Elizabeth Park. Thursdays at 10 o'clock is Hidden Treasure Park. And yeah, anybody that wants to spare an hour and come down, I mean, it's interesting anyways too. So it's good to get out and see real people and all that good stuff as well, and get some fresh air. So.
Is it physically distanced and masked or no?
Well, we're not masked because we're outside, but yeah, we are spreading out for sure. Yeah,
Okay, good. No,
yeah, and then
didn't look-
and then for the community one on the first, yeah, we would sure could use the help there for sure. So thanks everyone for coming. I know it's
Thank you.
it's a bit later and smaller crowd, but those are excellent questions. So thanks for
Could
that.
I just,
Oh,
hello,
Neil.
Rick? Yeah,
Yeah.
just when we do get a fairly large group out doing work in these parks, it's little, I don't often get everyone's name and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, if you put a couple of hours in Hidden Trails Park or down in Elizabeth Park, just send me those hours via an email, and I can record that with your name.
Good point.
Right on.
Goldsmith@shaw.ca.
Okay, and we'll post Nancy's PowerPoint on ProIsle, so I'll include Neil's email on that as well for hours. So
Yeah.
okay, thanks everyone. We'll
Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you in the parks.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see you all.
Good night.
Good night.
Nancy.
Thanks, Emily.
Okay. Good night.